everyone, and welcome to Falling Upwards, the place where failure can be fantastic. And boy, do we have a doozy for you today. With me, as always, is my lovely co-host. She's funky, she's fabulous, she's still sorting out her sleep schedule. It's Maddie Armstrong.
Hello. I'm tired. This is our fourth attempt at starting the episode, so welcome, everyone.
Can you let us know how your jet lag tribulations have been going?
So I'm basically on biphasic sleep, but instead of that being 4 hours, then I wake up, do something productive, and then go back to sleep for another 4 hours. It is your regular, normal person 8 hour chunk. She wakes up for 3 hours, then she sleeps for another 8 hours, and then maybe she's awake for 10 hours, and then she sleeps for 8 hours, and that's how it's going.
Well, let's kick off with your favourite starter to every episode. It's Maddie's lovely segment, Mad News.
So, I was browsing on the weird news stories tab of a unspecified news site, and it was telling me all about the wife carrying championship in North America, and I was like, this sounds so fun.
Wait, as in people carrying their wives. Wait, how does it work?
Okay, have you ever seen those like mud obstacle courses where like people just slide along a load of mud and
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes,
yes.
yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
So it's basically that, but you're carrying your wife the whole time. It comes like it's inspired by this Finnish folk tale about this bad guy who would steal women from towns long ago. But yeah, people just carry their wives, but it doesn't have to be their wife. And it sounds fun.
So it can be any relative?
Um, yeah, I mean, typically it's like you're carrying your wife, but like people of any gender do it, you know? It's inclusive for everyone, as long as you're carrying someone and you're not getting them muddy.
Do they have to be human? So you can't like carry your dog or your cat or your cow or something?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, human is the
Okay.
only sort of requirement.
So you could carry your grandma. You could carry. You could carry your kid? Could you carry your baby then? Because I feel like that might not be fair if you're carrying your baby, but your competitor's like carrying somebody much heavier.
No, the guideline is carry a wife or someone that you would call your wife for this competition. And typically they carry them upside down on their back so that they don't obstruct the like moving arms of the competitor. But I'm concerned about the blood flow to the brain for the poor wife or carryee, you know? Google it, look at the pictures. There's this couple that dressed up as the Incredibles, which is so funny.
Maybe we need one here in the UK. We need a version in the UK. Well, from wife carrying to mum power, we have the fantastic Sindhu Vee on the lawn with us today. British audiences might know her from her comedy special Sandhog, as well as her many turns on some legendary British comedy panel shows. But she's with us to chat about her brand new show, The Pradeeps of Pittsburgh, which, when you're listening to this, will be out on Amazon Prime. It follows a family as they move from India to Pittsburgh, and we get to see the hijinks that ensue as they settle into their brand new home. Maddie was not present for this interview, so you get to experience it for the first time with her.
Woo!
Hi, Sindhu. It is an absolute pleasure to be speaking to you today. Congratulations on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No, not at all. For some of our listeners that might not know you so well, you are a legend of British comedy. You might not feel it, but I think you are. How does it feel going from that British comedy scene, doing, so much work on amazing shows like Mock the Week and Dick Turpin? How does it feel like going from that to obviously the Pradeeps of Pittsburgh, which is, very much a American comedy show? How did that go?
Well, there's two levels to that. One is the actual changing of geography and having to be somewhere for several months, and it was cold. And that was what it was. But I have to say that moving out of UK comedy briefly to be in a show like Pradeep's, it didn't feel that strange because I'm an Indian. So the story is about the diaspora. So I still felt very grounded in all the same things I talk about. I talk about my family when I do stand up. I don't talk a lot about my immigrant experience as such, but I do talk about the experience of having children that are in the West and raised in the West, and I'm Indian. And so I sort of moved all that energy into this show. And I think that diaspora is everywhere, and the diaspora doesn't feel like it has boundaries. When you go from country to country and you eat Indian food or you meet other Indians, we're all tapping into a very similar sense of who we are and what we're like. So in that way, it wasn't a huge shift. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You referenced your kind of comedy work and especially your comedy special, where, like you mentioned, you do talk about being Indian and being a mom and being married, which was the first thing I thought of seeing you in this show, because that is exactly who that is.
Yeah.
What is so interesting is, as a comedian, you come across as incredibly erudite. And then Sudha herself is also being a surgeon, incredibly erudite. And yet, as you watch her progress, there are things she does in the show where you're like, that is absolutely nuts. How is this woman that is so smart doing this? How much of your personal experience and the stuff that you've already talked about did you really bring to the table there?
I think I understood Sudha very well. She's very, very bright. And she's not just smart, she's very bright. And this I completely empathize with her. She wants to win in every situation. And she will do what she has to do. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. Like I think if she wasn't behaving like that in the script, I'd be like, what is this lady doing? I wouldn't understand it, but I got it. So she's very bright, but sometimes you got to do weird stuff to get your way because you're right. You know what's good for your kids, especially as an Indian parent. And I can't speak for other kinds of Indian parents. I mean, other kinds of parents, but I have a lot of Asian friends. As parents, we know what's right. Our mothers knew what was right for us, and we know what's right for our kids. End of. It's always like that. And then there's the big sprinkle, of course.
What sort of stuff does she do? Because I'm really intrigued.
So I don't know. Obviously, by the time this is out, I think people might have seen some of it already, but I won't be spoiling anything in case this is a helpful introduction into the show. But she is the matriarch of the family, and she has 2 sons and 1 daughter. And obviously, it's as a comedy, they do play up some of the situations a little bit, but
Yeah.
she is, I don't want to say a crazy mum, because I think parents do just go above and beyond for their kids. But I think a lot of parents, and as Sindhu says as well, they feel they know what's right for their kids, and she will do anything to try and enforce that, not in like a terrible way, but in a, oh my goodness, that is a very embarrassing, mum, why did you do that, oh my god, kind of a way.
Have you had any moments like that?
See, it's funny, like looking back on my childhood now, I understand why my mum thinks/thought the way that she did. Do you ever get that now? Do you know what I mean? Like looking back on things when you were a kid, where you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I hated that when I was a kid, or I thought my mum was so excessive when I was a kid. But actually, when you look back on that now, you're like, yeah, I kind of get it. I would have hated me too.
It's like one of the biggest cycles in life is being told, oh, you'll agree with me when you're older by your parents, and be like, no, I won't. And then you get to being older and you're like, I agree. I'm not gonna say. My pride is too big.
Well, like we talk about like using phones and like social media all the time, and like when I was a kid, I hated being told I had to like not be on the computer. I had to put my phone down. And then now I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it when people tell me, please
Yeah.
put your phone down. I'm like, yay, that's great.
We just think we're invincible as kids, don't we?
Yeah.
As you get older and you have experiences, you learn how many things your mum was just right about, and you didn't need to put yourself through that.
Valuable learning experience, but also my mum was not necessarily wrong. She says that it's like, as an Indian mum, she feels that, but I think actually a lot of mums would vibe with that. And a lot of older kids that might now feel sorry for their mums a little bit.
Yeah.
Have your kids seen snippets of the show? Are they aware of what you're doing in the show? Are you ever going to let them watch it to see you like that?
if only I could stop my kids from doing what I didn't want them to do. God, I wish. They've seen the trailer.
Right.
And one of the comments that one of them said was, "This is not acting." That was the one thing. And I thought that to me was a compliment. And they were like, "This is not you acting." And they walked out of the room. So yeah. I mean, not half at the end of the trailer.
They saw it and they just saw mum being mum.
There's a little clip in the trailer where I'm kicking something out of like fury. You can see it on my face. And they were like, "This is not acting." And I was like, "I know."
Something that's so interesting about the show as well is obviously there's the comedic element of it, but it's actually framed by, as I was watching it, what comes across as quite a dark element, the idea that kind of deportation is a risk there for a lot of the show. It's this big shadow that's looming over them. You just forget about it with all of the hilarious things that are happening. How did that color how you were approaching the storytelling, how you were thinking about the stories that you were telling within the wider show?
I would say kudos to the writers because they never made it feel heavy, in the script. As long as I was showing up, listening to the director, knowing what that scene was about, I didn't have to think or worry about the fact that a few scenes down the road, we were going to be close to being deported or, in that deportation room. I never had to think about it. The writing was incredible. And it just, so what you see, the way it works is the writing being subtle at points and really, really hitting the comedy beats, but bringing us back to that thing. And they kept it light. They always kept it light in the script. And, so I wish I could say I was doing something big, but I was just doing what I had, doing my job on the basis of excellent writing.
Pausing there to explain that narrative structure a bit. So an interesting element to the comedy is that they are telling it back whilst they are being investigated for something that they've done. And the risk, if they are found to have done that thing, is that they might get deported. So it's interesting because you hear the different characters tell back their points of view to these agents. And obviously, because the scenarios are quite funny, that's what makes it comedic. But as I was watching it, I did think that is actually it is quite dark, because if they end up accused of what they're accused of, they're getting deported, they're leaving the country. So I would recommend people watch it just for that reason, because the narrative framing it's not purely a linear comedy. I mean, it is to a certain extent, but they utilize that they're all telling back the story from their different perspectives in that way.
It is very unapologetic about it being an immigrant experience. It wants to make sure that the audience understands all of the different facets of what an immigrant would have to deal with. For you personally, having had to be that immigrant going to the UK, do you have any kind of personal moments from the show that you really hope resonate with people?
My experience of moving to the West, I was much younger. I didn't have a family. The stakes were not that high. I mean, they were high in the sense if I ever got deported when I'd been here, my mother would have, I don't know what she would have done to me if I'd gone to India with that shame of having been deported. But sure, I think the thing about it was that I don't think here's the thing that really did resonate with me. A lot of very educated people from non-European, non-American countries, they bring extraordinary skills. They come to this country, they want to contribute, and they have the skills. And then one little thing goes wrong, and it's like all of that gets set aside, and you could just be thrown out. And I think that I was in academia for many years, and I always remember thinking every decision I made in the West was based around how will this affect my immigration status? And that's just a concern my peers didn't have.
That is a weighty thing to have over your head all the time.
Do you get to stay? Do you get to go? And I think she's right, where it's like it can be the littlest, smallest thing, and if it's flagged by the wrong person on the wrong day, my goodness, the ramifications, isn't it?
The mental toll of having to have something in your head constantly, something that you're stressing about, thinking about every single thing you do, that is just insane.
To her point about being in academia, she is obviously Sindhu is a brilliant, well-known comedian, but she is ridiculously educated. She went to Oxford. I think she went to McGill. She has masters. She is an incredibly smart lady. Comedy aside.
But yet she's still like was this based on her own experience, or was this just the character she was talking about?
I think with this she was talking about her own experience,
Right,
but I
right.
think there were parallels in that. Unlike a guest that we'll have on next week,
Ooh.
she wasn't born in the UK. She immigrated from India, so there is that parallel in terms of with Pradeep's. Her character also immigrates from India, so she has that knowledge, that lived experience, I guess.
She's so, well studied and, impressive with all those things under her belt. Yet, even someone like her actually worried about the risk of being deported from just a small thing. That's crazy.
It's a sad reality, isn't it? A sad reality.
It kind of, it's not nice by, any means, but it almost sort of makes sense how there is so much comedy or, comedic performances or anything like that that involves discussions around this, because it almost feels like what have we got left to do but to sort of have a laugh about it.
It's like you either laugh or you cry, isn't it, really?
Yeah, like you can't blame them for wanting to actually at least have something to smile about, only briefly.
Like even what subjects I could do in my PhD, how would they land me a job given that I had a passport that didn't look like, it's always in the back of your mind. And you still excelled and you still had friends and you still had a life, but it was right here all the time. And, I think that is something that the show, if you know that experience, you'll feel it in the show, that's always there,
You mention your background in academia, and for anybody who, again, is not familiar with your work, you do have an incredibly illustrious academic career, and you have alluded to how that's impacted you as a comedian. And I suppose going into this, it feels like one of the most acting heavy jobs that you've ever done.
Yeah.
How much has that kind of helped to inform your process, having not gone through that traditional kind of acting school route, more of the academic route?
Yeah, sure. That's such a good question. Right off the top of my head, because I've never thought of those two things together, but I think off the top of my head, I think it made me very diligent about getting homework done. Do my lines, get ready, make sure I'm saying the lines the way they're printed until someone says it's okay for me to, play around with it. I was very diligent about those things all the time because I just did so many years of homework and had to get A's on all my assignments for decades, school and university and then grad school. So I think that definitely had some impact,
I can imagine by comparison, grad school seems much more stressful than sitting and just making sure you've got your lines learned. Or is it the other way around?
It's the other way around.
Okay.
It's very much the other way, because when you're in a scene, you have scene partners, you have a responsibility to everyone in the scene, When you're a grad student, it's your essay, it goes in late, who cares? This is like there's a team of people, you can't, you got to show up prepared.
Can I just say, I love that she was like, with grad school if it's late. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I like that when you kind of get to that point in whatever career you're in, you can measure whether it's worth slacking off a little bit for certain tasks or not. She clearly felt it was fine past a certain point.
Good on her.
I suspect what's coming up is what I personally think is, as I've said to you several times now, my favorite failure we've had on the show thus far.
I'm very excited for this. Emma has really.
Have I talked up too much?
Yeah, she's really like beefed up how good this failure is. So I'm really expecting everything here.
We like to ask everybody, because obviously this is a high-pressured world that we live in, and social media makes it even more pressured for everybody. Do you have a favorite failure, in whether that's in your career or whether that's just you as yourself?
Favorite failure?
Yes.
Oh my God, yes. It's like so easy. When I was trying to leave my PhD and I needed to have paperwork to remain in the West, like not become illegal, I needed to get a job because you need a visa to stay. And my student visa would end when I left my PhD. And so I started applying for jobs that I outside of academia, and I was not prepared. So I talked to my friends, and a lot of them were in finance, a lot of them were doing consulting. And they said, "Oh, you talk so much. You'll be a great consultant." So I had a very good CV. I mean, I do talk so much. Listen to me. Anyway, I had a great CV, and so I applied to finance, which I didn't think I'd get, and then I applied to consulting. Here's the big fail. I applied to 18 consulting firms. I got 19 rejection letters. Someone heard I was applying and was like, "Don't even waste the paper of your CV." I was like, "How do I have more rejection letters than applications?" It was I felt like such a failure then.
Wait, so that was a company you hadn't even applied to. It wasn't even like you'd applied once, but they sent it twice by mistake.
No, I remember the name of the company. I'll never forget it. I was like, they heard I was applying and they were like, "You're trash. Don't even bother." Anyway, but weirdly enough, I got a job in finance, and that's a different story. But that was a big fail. I was like, how are people who don't know me failing me?
Oh my gosh. I've never heard that.
I just don't think we're going to top that for a while. I'm not going to lie. In all the episodes we've had so far, this is it takes the cake. It was the fact that it was just that
That is beyond anything I've ever heard. Like they made the effort. That she didn't even apply, and they made the effort. Was it like a physical rejection letter?
I think it would have been a letter then, yeah, an actual letter, yeah.
Physical paper. So they printed out, they typed it up, they got her info, they printed it out, and they sent it to her to say, "Don't bother." How
It is our best failure. It just is.
I would never have.
That was
Wow, that is everything you promised it would be.
because at first when she said, "Oh, I got 19," I thought, "Oh, maybe they'd sent it twice," which still is a bit of a fail. Where it's like, "Oh, they wanted to drill in. One person wanted to drill." No, somebody already went no.
I would just give up. Because where do you go from there?
Before she applies, we want her to know that it's a no.
Sent 18 applications, you got 19 rejections. That's beautiful.
Oh my God, an incredible failure.
We'll even use the paper for it.
And can I just say, what I love about that failure as well is obviously she does say she eventually got a job, which is good. It has nothing like, she went on to be very successful, but genuinely that it has no impact on. It's not like, "Oh, I did my first comedy gig and it was really bad, but I bounced back next time." No, she just actually just got an extra rejection letter and she moved on with her life.
Well, good on her for
Would that have floored you? That would have just floored you.
keeping going after that, because I don't know how I would have taken that.
Do you have something that you're loving right now, whether that is a piece of music or a meal or a hobby that you would love our readers and listeners to also get into, that you think that they might also love and enjoy, that might enrich their life too?
Oh, goodness. I cannot sing, but I love to sing. So I've started doing it for the joy of like how happy I feel when I do it, as opposed to anything of what it sounds like.
Oh.
Because I think I love singing out loud. I'm so bad at it, but I love to do it. And I think, I think if people did a little bit of what they love to do, even if they're not good at it, quote unquote, is this weird endorphin pop in your head, and then you don't judge yourself. You say, "I had such a great time." Some people, it might be going for a jog. Don't do it if it involves harming someone else. Like, I really want to do it. Don't do that. Just for yourself, something joyful.
I'm exactly the same though. Like okay, I'm always singing on my own in my room, and I think I told you, Ame, I went to what they call a norebang in Korea recently,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I could not sing. I don't know why. Like, it was even worse than it usually is, but it was terrible. But I had such a blast, and it really does make you feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah. The two messages from this is because I thought she was going to recommend singing in general. which is an enjoyable activity, irrespective of whether or not you can sing, as you've just evidenced, but also just the very nice do something you love.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't hurt someone.
And I did wonder, would Maddie veto that because we can't Google something you love as something specific to do? But her sentiments are nice.
Oh, yeah, but because she mentions, like, singing specifically, I think it's a nice reminder for you all to just if you're at home and, like, there's no even if there is someone else in the house and they'd be disturbed, keep it down, but, like, let it out a little bit, mate.
Yeah, sing.
Have a little sing along. If it's in you, let it out. Let that inner Troy Bolton out.
I was not expecting a High School Musical reference, I'm not gonna lie.
There's always a High School Musical reference.
Well, I love that. So for the exchange, the lovely Sindhu Vee said, you know, do something you love. But I do think her singing recommendation is Maddie had a
Yeah.
good sing in South Korea. We should all have a good sing. Do you have a karaoke song, Mad?
So, one of the well, the song that, like, was, like, the national anthem for me while I was there, and, like, the most mandatory song I could ever pick to play, and I think you'll know which one this is View by Shiny. So that was my number one. Like, if you know the song, you'll know why. I saw them before it live in was it Madrid? It was at a festival.
Were you channeling that when you do you channel that when you karaoke their songs?
Well, I hope so. I can only hope to exude a fraction of Shiny's power. A teeny tiny fraction of a fraction, but yeah, one of the greatest songs of all time.
Nice.
Do not argue with me on this.
Nice. Love it. We'll jump into our sign-off message,
Woo!
but we will, unlike as usual with our guests, usually we let them sign off, but we're going to start with Sindhu's today because actually she has quite a bit to say. It's quite interesting, multi-layered sign-off message.
The piece of advice I would give any kid, including my own, that I know Sudha would give her kids and other kids is it doesn't matter what you choose to do academically, but understand you have to support yourself, and for that you need drive. Drive. That's it.
What would you say your driving force is?
I don't think it's a force. I think it's drive. It's waking up in the morning and saying, I've made these decisions and I'm going to commit myself well to this. And I'm, and no, like, you need to work hard. You need to take, you stumble, you need to get up. You have to have drive. You need to, if you're committed to it, you got to see it through. You got to make it happen.
Is that something you've always had, or is that something you've had to cultivate over time?
I don't know. It's something my mother used to chase us around the house with her slipper in her hand, saying, have drive, have drive. You don't have drive, you are lazy. And we'd be like running away from her, which I don't know, but in India, that's not even that uncommon. So I don't know. I think my mother inculcated it in us, both the slipper in the hand, but also by her own behavior. I think I've learned to really value things that have happened to me or that are happening to me that I'm engaged with because I bring a certain drive and a certain desire to be well committed. So it has this, it repays you. As one day I hope Bhanu says in the show, her mother was right. And I will say my mother was right. So,
as I mentioned, you have been on some of the most iconic British comedy panel shows. Which character out of all of the characters in the show do you think would do best on one of those shows? Whether that's Mock the Week or QI or whichever, which character would you send and why?
Vinod.
Okay.
Because he always has an answer. He's so quick. He always has an answer. He's very observant. He'd be perfect. And he is not self-conscious at all. Mock the Week, you can't be self-conscious. You got to get on. You got to say your joke. You got to have the confidence, and you got to get up in front of another comic and do it. He'd be perfect.
Is that something that you just benefit from when you're a child, when you don't have to worry about things?
No, I was terrible on Mock the Week in terms of, I did it, but I was always like, should I go? Should I not go? I once said to another comic, why don't you go first? Which is the opposite of what you're supposed to do. I've never had the kind of confidence that he has in the show. Never.
Okay. See, I'm very multi-layered message, multiple messages, multiple sign-offs.
Sindhu is locked in.
Yeah, man.
That's what we've learned. We've got to have that drive.
Yes. I say that whilst I'm still fluey and you're still grappling with jet lag.
Can you tell? My eyes are like so red. I'm just trying to keep them open this episode.
Maybe we can each find the drive and the confidence to overcome flu and jet lag. Does that work as a concept? I don't know.
Yeah. Hopefully our immune systems and circadian rhythms will find the drive.
Yeah. I like that though, the idea of having drive, and the reason that we ended up discussing kind of the youngest child in the show is he's a very confident boy, and you do just kind of have that confidence as a kid, don't you?
Yeah. And then everyone sort of bats it out of you.
Yeah. What would your sign off message be then, Maddie, with that in mind?
Oof. Well, I just want to back Sindhu on have a nice little belt in your room.
Yeah. I want to back Sindhu too. I actually think she should run all our lives because she's got it sorted, man.
Yeah.
She's smart. She's funny.
Yeah.
She knows all the things. Be more like Sindhu Vee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please do.
Well, the brilliant, amazing, and by no means failing Sindhu Vee can be seen in The Pradeeps of Pittsburgh, out now on Amazon Prime Video. Go and check it out. And as always, thank you very much for catching another episode of Falling Upwards.
Thank you for listening.